Reconquista, Conquista, Inquisition, Invincible Armada, Franco. All these are pages from the past of the state that occupies the lion's share of the Iberian Peninsula. Recently, we launched our first regular series, The History of Countries. Today, it's Spain. We'll quickly walk through its entire chronology from the earliest times. After this video, you can write in the comments the country whose history you'd like to hear about next, and we'll definitely make a video about it. No more delays. Get comfortable. We're starting. The history of Spain begins with the Phoenicians, who around the 11th to 9th centuries BC founded trading settlements on the southern coast of the Iberian Peninsula. It was they who gave life to cities such as Agadir, Malacca, and New Carthage. Across the Mediterranean and through the Strait of Gibraltar ran busy trade routes carrying silver, tin, purple dye, and wine. After the First Punic War, Hannibal Barca greatly expanded Carthaginian holdings in the east and south of the peninsula. But just 20 years later, after defeat in the Second Punic War and his tragic march across the Alps, control over these lands finally passed to the Romans. Only at the turn of the new era did Spain come fully under Roman rule, and very quickly became the second most important part of the empire after Italy itself. It was from here that the emperors Trajan, Hadrian, Theodosius I, and Marcus Aurelius hailed, 3 of the 5 good emperors and one of the most outstanding rulers of the late empire. Roman culture, law, the Latin language, roads, aqueducts, and cities took such deep root in Spain that modern historians often call it the most Roman of all the former provinces. Even after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, ancient traditions survived here longer than almost anywhere else. After a brief period of Swabian Vandal rule, the Visigoths established themselves on the peninsula, though their power was not absolute. From 552 to 625, the southeastern coast was controlled by the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium. They had been invited to help against King Agila by a local aristocrat named Athanagild. The Byzantines held Cordoba, Malaga, Cartagena, and Acidona, preserving Roman law, coinage, and active trade with Constantinople. Only at the beginning of the 8th century did the Visigothic kings Leovigild and his successors finally drive out the Greeks. Peace did not last long. In 711, an Arab Berber force led by Tariq ibn Ziyad landed at the rock that would later take his name, Gibraltar. Within a few years, Muslim armies crushed the Visigothic kingdom at the Battle of Guadalete, seized almost the entire peninsula, and created the state of Al-Andalus. Only a narrow strip in the north, Asturias, remained unconquered and became the center of resistance. The Moors tried to push further into Europe, but in 732, the Frankish mayor of the palace, Charles Martel, stopped them at the Battle of Poitiers, ending the great Islamic expansion into the west. The revival of Christian states began in the 10th century thanks to rulers such as Alfonso III, Sancho III, and Ferdinand I of Castile. They not only reconquered lands but also created the first law codes, for example the Fuero Juzgo, and forced the emirs to pay parias in gold and even slaves. At the end of the 11th century, the Almoravids, and later the Almohads, dealt heavy blows to the Christians. But on June 16, 1212, in the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa, a united army of Castile, Aragon, Navarre, and European Crusader knights crushed the army of Caliph al-Nasir. This victory opened the way to the final liberation of the south. Over the next 40 years, Cordoba, Valencia, and Seville fell. The last stronghold was the Emirate of Granada, which lasted until the 2nd of January 1492, when King Boabdil handed the keys of the Alhambra to Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile. It was precisely the marriage of Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon in 1469 that united the 2 largest Christian kingdoms of the peninsula and laid the foundation for the future Spain. In the very same year of 1492, besides the fall of Granada and the discovery of America, the Alhambra decree was issued expelling the Jews. And from the 1480s, the restored Spanish Inquisition, headed by Tomás de Torquemada, was actively operating as an instrument of religious and political unification. At the same moment that the Reconquista was completed, the era of the great geographical discoveries began. On January 2, 1492, the last gates of Granada opened before the armies of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile. A new era immediately began, the age of great geographical discoveries. Just a few months later, on August 3, 1492, 3 small caravels, Santa Maria, Pinta, and Niña, Under the command of the Genoese, Christopher Columbus sailed from the tiny Andalusian port of Palos de la Frontera. On October 12th, they reached an island Columbus named San Salvador, one of today's Bahamas. Until his dying day, the navigator remained convinced he had found the western approaches to India or Japan, but the Spanish crown instantly grasped the truth. Not merely a new route to spices had been discovered, but an entire new world. The Conquista began, the lightning-fast and ruthless conquest of America by the very same knights who had spent 8 centuries fighting the Moors on the Iberian Peninsula. Hernán Cortés, with 500 Spaniards, 16 horses, and a handful of cannons, destroyed the Aztec Empire, with its million-strong army and its capital Tenochtitlan larger than any city in Europe in just 2 years. Francisco Pizarro, with 180 men, put the Inca Emperor Atahualpa in chains and within a few years subdued a state that stretched 5,000 kilometers along the length of the Andes. Chroniclers tell of thousands of other adventurers, from Pedro de Alvarado in Guatemala to Diego de Almagro in Chile, who raised cross and sword over the Maya, Chibcha, Muisca, Tarascans, Zapotecs, Mixtecs, and dozens of smaller peoples across the Caribbean, Mesoamerica, and the Andes. Rivers of gold and, above all, silver, especially from the mines of Potosi in present-day Bolivia, poured into Europe. 1/5 of all booty, the famous Royal Fifth, Quinto Real, settled in Seville, and within decades, Spain became the richest and most powerful state on the continent. This was the Golden Age, Siglo de Oro. Under Charles I, who was simultaneously Holy Roman Emperor as Charles V, the Spanish tercios, the finest infantry of their time, crushed the French at Pavia, the Imperials at Mühlberg, the Ottoman fleet at Lepanto, and the Portuguese near the Azores. Spanish galleons ruled every ocean. Spanish bankers in Antwerp, Genoa, and Augsburg financed half of European politics. Philip II built the Escorial, a gigantic monastery palace outside Madrid that became the symbol of Catholic might, austere faith, and somber grandeur. Spanish theologians, Francisco de Vitoria, Domingo de Soto, Francisco Suarez, laid the foundations of modern international law and the theory of just war. Yet already under Philip II, the first cracks appeared. In 1588, the Invincible Armada, 130 great ships and almost 30,000 men, sailed against England and was shattered by English fireships under Francis Drake, the maneuvers of Charles Howard, and ferocious Atlantic storms. The loss of the fleet became not merely a military defeat, but the symbol of the beginning of a long decline. The 17th century brought real catastrophe to Spain. American silver triggered the price revolution of prices, runaway inflation that destroyed Spanish crafts and trade. Spanish cloth and iron became too expensive, while Dutch and English goods were cheaper and better. The expulsion of 300,000 Moriscos, baptized descendants of Muslims, in 1609 to 1614 devastated the most fertile lands of Valencia, Aragon, and Murcia. Fields grew over with weeds, irrigation systems fell into ruin. Spain lost war after war. The French smashed the tercios at Rocroi in 1643, the Netherlands won independence. Portugal broke away in 1640, Catalonia and Andalusia rebelled. In 1700, the death of the last Habsburg, the sickly and childless Charles II, sparked the War of the Spanish Succession, one of the largest European wars of the era. By the treaties of Utrecht and Rastatt, Spain lost all its European possessions, the Spanish Netherlands, the Kingdom of Naples, Milan, Sardinia, Sicily, but kept its overseas empire and received a new dynasty, the French Bourbon. The first Bourbons brought the wind of the Enlightenment. Philip V centralized the state, abolishing the special privileges of Aragon and Catalonia. Ferdinand VI, and especially Charles III, the most talented Spanish monarch of the 18th century, carried out profound reforms. They expelled the Jesuits in 1767, freed trade with America from Seville's monopoly, built new roads, canals, ports, royal manufactories. The population grew, cities were rebuilt, the fleet once again became formidable. Yet, at the beginning of the 19th century, Napoleon destroyed everything. In 1808, he forcibly placed his brother Joseph Bonaparte on the throne. The War of Independence of 1808 to 1814 became the first great guerrilla war in history. Tens of thousands of guerrilleros, peasants, monks, smugglers, together with Wellington's regular British army and even a small Russian corps drove out the French, but the price was ruined cities, burned fields, and the loss of most American colonies, which won independence precisely during those years. The entire 19th century Spain spent in chaos, 3 Carlist wars over the succession, dozens of revolutions and military coups, the constant proclamation and abolition of constitutions, fighting among liberals, absolutists, and moderados. Only in 1876 did the brilliant conservative Antonio Cánovas del Castillo create the system of peaceful alternation. The 2 big parties, conservative and liberal, agreed in advance who would win the elections and took turns in power. This gave almost half a century of relative calm. Railways were built, Catalan textile and Basque metallurgical industries flourished, major banks and stock exchanges appeared. Yet in 1898, Spain lost a short war to the United States, and with it, the last overseas jewels: Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Guam. The disaster of '98 became a national trauma and gave birth to the generation of '98. Intellectuals who search painfully for the causes of their country's decline. In the 20th century, history seemed to spin in a new vicious circle. The dictatorship of General Primo de Rivera, the proclamation of the Second Republic in 1931, the polarization of society, the victory of the Popular Front in the February 1936 elections, the military uprising of July 1936, and one of the bloodiest civil wars of the century. After 3 years of fighting, the bombing of Guernica, 1 million dead and millions of refugees, victory went to the nationalists led by Francisco Franco. Almost 40 years of authoritarian rule ended only with the death of the caudillo on November 20th, 1975. This is the long, dramatic, tragic, and at the same time extraordinarily rich history of Spain. Which period seems to you the most remarkable and fascinating? Roman Hispania, the brilliant Al-Andalus, the golden age of the empire where the sun never set, or perhaps the incredible modern revival and economic miracle after 1975? We look forward to your thoughts in the comments. That's all for today. See you soon, friends!